somebody because of what they did in the military.
For people our age, what he says is, I don't want to intentionally talk shit on people. We are called Feeling Hurt While You Wait.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Whiskey, Lead and Steel, Feeling Hurt While You Wait, the official Aggressive Defensive Solutions podcast. I'm Rick Sutton, and with me today is Lee Curling, also of Aggressive Defensive Solutions. Today, what we want to talk about is, are you a shooter/instructor, or are you just some guy who is a former cop or former military? And how does that play into what the consumer gets, or what the student/client gets as an end state user? So, Lee, of course, has an extensive background with military police, and you've worked with military trainers and external trainers and contract trainers. What are your thoughts on that? How important is them being an ex-cop or an ex-military when it comes to teaching something?
Well, first, let me say that somebody's feelings is really going to get hurt today.
Yeah,
I'm certain. I am certain of that.
I am certain. There'll be a lot of wet T-shirts behind this one.
Yeah. I'm sure that somebody's going to get on a keyboard and already typing. Yeah. But I think throughout my military career and looking at some of the people that are out there, kind of in the industry doing some things, just because you carried a gun down range does not qualify you to go teach people how to shoot.
No, God no.
Right? I mean, without a doubt. Right?
Or teach tactics.
Especially teaching tactics, or just teaching. Right? Some guy with one tour under your belt. You get out as an E4, maybe an E5. Does the military training aspects of how to conduct training, how to put together training, isn't there yet, right? Yeah. I mean, that's huge amount of what I learned in how to conduct that training is, the second half of my career, yeah. Right? It was that, right? Yeah. How do you figure out what tasks are? How do you figure out break those down to your individual task, figuring out the high payoff task over a set of collective tasks, right? It is a huge amount of work that goes into figuring out how to conduct training and how to put together a good training plan. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So you of course you've got terminal learning objectives and enabling learning objectives, obviously. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. Gravitas obviously plays some factor in this, right?
Right.
One of the things that I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, Chris, when we were working down at Blackwater one time, and he pointed out that he inherently felt like he was going to get more from a guy who was either active military or active cop at that point in time, mm-hmm. and was sideline instructing and they had to be a good shooter, they had to be mm-hmm. knowledgeable. He said that he would rather take a class from a decent instructor who was either currently actively involved in that stuff or mm-hmm. had done a career of it. Right. The guy spent 20 years as a cop or mm-hmm. 20 years as a soldier, and he had developed these skill sets, and now as a second career, he's a weapons and tactics instructor. Mm-hmm. He said he'd rather take a class from a guy like that than a guy who did 3 years in the Army mm-hmm. 15 years ago.
Right. Or
the guy who was a deputy sheriff someplace for a year and a half and then saw the training world as a big payoff and left and went there, and now he's been there for 6 years because the guy didn't have any gravitas. Mm-hmm. Because and while that's not the end all be all, I personally don't want to take skydiving lessons from somebody who's never jumped out of an airplane.
So to that end,
yeah,
right? I jumped out of airplanes. All right, the Army sent me to school, kicked me out of airplanes, but I am not a senior parachutist. I am not a master parachutist. I am not a rigger. I have absolutely zero qualifications to teach you how to jump out of an airplane and not die. I mean, I could teach you how to jump out of an airplane.
Yeah.
But will you actually make it to the ground and not die? Who knows? Who knows? Right? But you know, that's actually not a bad analogy there, right? Because again, right? Sure, hey, I've jumped out of airplanes. I can do that. But no, I don't understand how to teach that skill set. I just don't know how to teach that skill set, right? I mean, that does, you know, without a doubt. And I think that wraps back into the guy who was in.
Yeah.
What did you do? Right? If you were an 88 Mike, I got nothing against truck drivers. They're important out there, right? What do you know about kicking doors?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Day to day, right? You were an air crewman on a helicopter. What do you know about kicking doors?
Yeah.
Right? It's you know.
You're a supply guy. What do you know about distance shooting?
Yeah. Right. I mean, just because you're a good shooter, or you qualified expert with your M4, that inherently does not qualify you. And I want to say inherently because there's a lot of guys out there that have gone, they've done a lot of things, and I certainly don't want to throw shade on somebody. I think that's what the young kids still say. You know, against somebody because of what they did in the military.
For people our age, what he says is, I don't want to intentionally talk shit on people. We are called feelings hurt while you wait.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Foul language warning ahead. Go ahead. McLucky said we needed to do that.
Okay.
So that we don't lose our R rating. Okay. Find ourselves in the porn industry. It's McLucky.
Okay, and now I got to figure out what was I talking about again?
So we were talking.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. So, but you know, regardless of what you did in the military, you know, that doesn't disqualify you from being a good instructor.
Exactly.
Right? I want to be clear on that. But I do want to say that doesn't, depending on what you did, doesn't inherently make you qualified to be an instructor.
Exactly.
There is a distinction between those two things.
Exactly.
Right? I think before we talked about this, somebody that's down, in DevGru, you're going to be a shooter, right? You're going to be a door kicker, right? Does that mean you're a trainer? I don't know. There's other qualifications of being a trainer.
Yeah.
You're down at at Bragg at the JFK school, right? That is what you do.
Yeah,
right.
That's Army Special Forces' first mission is to be a trainer.
Absolutely, right. So those guys with the little funny little green hats, all the respect in the world for them because that's what they do, right? Yeah. Go behind lines, teach insurgents how to do things.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding that gravitas. Hey, this guy's a veteran of X. Yeah, there's a little bit more to it than that. Right. And guys I've known that have been in the military, right? Some of them should not be teaching anybody anything.
Yeah.
Other guys absolutely have gone on and have had stellar careers, right? Being instructors and doing other things outside of the military along those lines. So, and I think the same thing in law enforcement. Yeah. Right. Again, my law enforcement is on the military side, right, as an MP, but of the guys I know that are police officers, and the guys that have gotten out and become police officers, some of them are great cops, right? Some of them are great police officers, right? And at some point, I'm sure you'll give us a distinction in your thoughts between those two terms.
Yeah.
But great cops don't necessarily make great instructors. And
perfect example of that is I worked with a bunch of dudes who were fantastic police officers, just street monsters. Horrible field training officers. A lot of them, it was because they didn't have the patience to teach somebody. They were like, no, we get to get the job done. But you're absolutely right. Being a good cop does not necessarily make you a good instructor. I worked with guys. I was on the shooting team with guys, and guys who were friends of yours as well, who were really good shooters, but couldn't teach somebody how to shoot. Now, what they could say is, if you can watch me and you can emulate me, you can get good.
Right.
But I can't tell you how to get this good.
Right.
And, you know, as an end state user, at the end of the day, if I'm giving you my money, I should leave that encounter better or more knowledgeable than I was when I walked through the door. And that's the big issue that I find, because, like we talked about, so many people, the space is just flooded with guys who, well, I'm at downrange, so I'm an operational guy, so I'm now qualified to teach you, or, you know, I got trained by a guy who went downrange, and as a result of that, I'm, you know, qualified to do what I do. And there then comes the difference between talking to that guy and talking to somebody who has downrange experience, but then can actually teach you what's going on and teach you what it is that you can do. And, you know, I knew guys in the Marine Corps, and then I worked with guys as well who were good operators, had good sound tactics, but weren't necessarily good gun handlers. You know, I knew guys who could clear rooms, and fortunately the rooms were small spaces if they had to take the shot, you know, because out beyond, you know, realistic handgun distance, they weren't really much use.
Right.
So you got to understand that, and you got to look at that, and that comes into play. But again, as the company gunny, when I was a company gunny, my leanings towards how all that worked is different than how a first sergeant looks at it, and especially first sergeant of MPs, because you know, we didn't have the mission in the Marine Corps that the Army MPs have, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. And that's, so I wanted to get your perspective on this, because you've got experience on both sides of the fence on that. Well, all three sides of the fence, really, because you did some civilian law enforcement as well. Yeah, I couldn't agree any more with what it is that you've got to say. That's good stuff. Any rocks, bottles, bombs, or alibis?
Well, you know, it's funny because, you know, you mentioned, as you talk about, you know, me being an MP, it's interesting because as an MP we had two very, very different missions, and they were massively different skill sets.
Yeah.
Right. I'm in Germany, right, with MPs doing law and order.
Yeah.
Right.
Police work.
Actual police work. Right. You know, writing tickets, you know, DUI stops, domestic incidences, you know,
building
the
burglary investigations.
Looking for ghosts in attics. Yes, we would get those calls. There's a ghost in the attic. Generally, it was teenage kids that went in the attics in those World War II building.
So typically, then you would send a specialist with a saw up there, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, the flip side of that was the combat support mission, and you know, we're downrange in you know, Iraq, and you know, you're 3-man team in a well armored Humvee and Mark 19 or, you know, 50 cal, or at one point we just had saws, you know. So, you know, right. So very, very different mission sets, and it's interesting on that because the same soldiers, right? I had the same soldiers that one may perform very, very well in one environment, and maybe a little less so in the other environment. Generally, they all performed much better, actually, you know, downrange.
Yeah.
Than misses, you know, sometimes in that other environment. So, and again, it does get back to skill set, gets into training, it gets into understanding how to develop that training.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned something, and as an aside to that is on some of these guys that are good shooters, and I can't teach you how to shoot. Yeah. You know, as an example, my youngest son, bring him out to the executive range, you know, does not do a lot of shooting, comes out here, shoots, and I mean, just natural.
Yeah. He's a good
but
shooter.
You know, you could watch him shoot, and you go, oh man, maybe he can teach me, you know, a thing or two. No, he has no idea how he does it.
Yeah.
He just naturally he listened to instruction, he picked it up, and is just good at it.
Yeah.
So there are those natural shooters.
Yep.
As you said, with that going, I can't tell you what I'm doing. Just watch me, and if you can emulate it, you can do it. That's, I think those of us that struggled, I struggled with improving my shooting, and I understand what I had to do to improve my shooting. I can now relate that and look at what somebody's doing and going, I've been there.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's been more recent. Maybe it's been a long time, but I've been there.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
Yeah. But that's it.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your insight and thanks for your information. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you found it entertaining and educational. If we didn't hurt your feelings, it wasn't for lack of trying. We'll be sure to catch up with you on the next time. And thanks again. We'll see you on the next time. Couldn't teach somebody how to shoot. Now, what they could say is, if you can watch me and you can emulate me, you can get good.
Right.
But I can't tell you how to get this good.
Right.